It's the Bold Republic Radio Show. My name's Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. We head on down to Charles. Are you in Cheyenne today? I believe you are, right?
Yes, sir.
Charles Curley is on the phone, and you were, I believe, Maureen told me, were you testifying today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Has the Novocaine wore off?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It has. My mouth is working again.
Yeah, okay. Good. So what Charles was testifying, if I have this right, about gun rights in Wyoming and where you can carry a gun?
Yes, we're talking about HB 114,
Right.
which would repeal a number of the places where, under current statute, you cannot carry concealed with a permit. So, for example, schools, community colleges, the University of Wyoming, and the bill was brought by Alan Yagi.
Right.
And it mirrors language in Utah that's been in place for quite a while. So the Utah has about 15 years experience with this.
Right.
And let me ask you this, Glenn.
Yeah.
When was the last mass shooting in Utah?
Oh, it's just pure carnage out there. I mean,
it's terrible.
It's a body a minute, for Pete's sake.
So, and one of the things that Don Wills, who's a local liberty activist, you know him.
Oh, I know Don, yeah.
Okay, so he paid to bring John Lott in, and John came prepared with some excellent testimony, and maybe I can repeat some of that for your benefit. Well, you had him on the show recently.
Oh, yeah. That was Tuesday I had him on this program.
Tuesday,
Guy was good, and I've got to get that book that he wrote.
And his website is full of all sorts of good stuff. A lot of what he talked about is on his website.
Okay, now let's give a little bit of I was talking with Nick DeLotte, and you were too just before I came on. Apparently, that the original bill that was designed to free up so permit holders could go into college campuses, high schools, things like that. Was that sort of rerouted around and rewritten, and we got into some minutia over it? Did that happen down there?
Yeah. Okay. Here's what happened. Hank Coe drafted, I believe he did, because there's no name on it yet, but Hank Coe drafted a proposed amendment. It is such a huge and massive amendment that it will be a substitute bill. In fact, the copy of it says this is a substitute.
Yeah.
It's substitute number X. So what it does, a couple of things that are really nasty. One of them is, the current bill says concealed carry is permitted in these places. The Coe amendment says concealed carry is permitted if the governing board allows it. And there's no process for appeal.
Right.
So they can make their decision, and that's it. And
well, okay, who are we? So we know who are we defining as the governing board?
Oh, there's a huge, long set of definitions here.
Yeah.
So, for example, a school, it would be the board of trustees for that school.
Okay.
If it's the university, it would be the University of Wyoming.
Okay,
board.
so it would be up to the local school to decide, for example, if they're going to allow concealed carry holders to walk into a school with a gun or not.
Correct.
Okay.
With the addition that they can delegate. So we're not talking about just the University of Wyoming, just our, 48 school districts, and just our community colleges. If, say, the University of Wyoming trustees decide they want to delegate it, we could have 100 or 150 different bodies all making this determination.
Right. Now, the problem there, correct me if I'm wrong, the way I see it is, so I could walk into one school and I would be okay, but another school has a different set of rules. I didn't know that. I'm in trouble.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't remember seeing any provision for them to post it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a nightmare waiting to happen.
Right.
Do you remember what it was like before we reformed concealed carry in the 1990s?
Well, I was in Florida back then, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then you know what happened in Florida.
Yeah.
They went from every sheriff has his own rules and issues permits or not as he sees fit. And that's what we had in Wyoming. And we got rid of that in the early 90s, based in large part on Florida's pioneering shall issue statewide concealed carry permit.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody thought that was a major improvement, and of course it was. And I got to thank you guys in Florida, because Marion Hammer pushed that heavily and set a precedent that we could then use in Wyoming. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I remember in Florida at the time, carjackings were on the rise, in Orlando especially. And then all of a sudden, people were allowed to carry guns, and it ended really on over a period of maybe a couple of weeks. People were trying to carjack automobiles at traffic lights, and citizens were getting out of their vehicles long before the police could ever arrive and putting a stop to it.
Yep.
There's not that many carjackings in Orlando anymore.
No, you're right. And, they've gone away, crime is down, et cetera, et cetera. So what the Coe Amendment, rather, does is it brings back not just 23 different concealed carry regimes, but who knows, 50, 100. It's terrible.
Okay, so whatever happened to it? Where did that die, or where are we at with it?
Okay, here we get into some minutia about how the legislature works.
Yeah.
They voted to report the bill out as amend and pass.
Mm-hmm.
So this goes to the Senate. It's on general file right now. The Senate will vote to amend it or not as they see fit. Then, having amended it, they vote to adopt it on first reading.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, my knowledge gets a little bit fuzzy, but I think we may be able to amend it at that point, amend further.
Right.
In any case, we will get a chance to amend further if that's what we want to do in committee of the whole, and again at third reading. And then if the Coe Amendment sticks, it goes to House Senate Conference Committee. So we still have some options here.
Okay, but what we were originally trying to get passed is that gone? Is that dead?
It depends on what the Senate does.
Right.
But my guess is it's probably we're not going to get the original bill back again. So the question is, do we want to amend it? And if we can amend it, do we want to settle for the amendments we might produce?
Well, and what are the chances that, because this gets complicated, and as people listen to us over the radio, it gets kind of hard to listen to all of what, the procedures are. So at some point, does the whole thing just get to be such a complicated mess that it just dies and we have to try again next year?
That's a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
If the Coe Amendment is successful and we bring some amendments in the Senate, what happens in House Senate Conference Committee?
Yeah.
And Representative Yegi will be on that House Senate Conference Committee, and at least the last time I talked to him late yesterday afternoon, he did not want to have anything to do with the Coe Amendment. So there's a real good chance that it would die in House Senate Conference Committee.
Okay. Yeah, see, this is where I just sometimes get a headache listening to all the procedures here. Now, you probably don't know this, but I got to ask, since you're just down there wandering the hallways. If, let's say, the bill in its original form, which would have just allowed, again, correct me if I'm wrong, people who were properly permitted in the state of Wyoming into schools, including, colleges, middle schools, things like that. Is that how this thing was supposed to be written?
That's basically it. Yep.
Okay, so where was the governor on this?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have not heard anything.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that Julian Balow testified against the bill as originally written.
Right.
And I think that's a pretty good clue as to what the governor's thinking. Also remember that he vetoed SF 14, which would have reformed asset forfeiture.
Right.
He is not in favor of changing the current law to allow any more freedom in Wyoming.
Okay.
I mean, that's my guess. But
yeah,
judging from those two things and some other things we've seen, I mean, you remember SF 104.
Oh, no, I remember that. Now, real quick, what did you say during your testimony yesterday?
We talked a little bit about concealed carry reform in Wyoming in 1990s. I was on the group with the group of people who drafted that bill and put it together. And I was at the committee hearings when the bill was discussed and worked with it. And then, as now, we got a lot of, oh, gee, what if? Oh, gee, this horrible thing might happen.
Yeah.
I remember listening to the people from the Attorney General's office saying, what happens if somebody goes crazy and has a permit and somebody sues us because we issued a permit and shouldn't have?
Right.
And, you know, that one, he had to bring that up about 3 times before he finally got my answer.
Mm-hmm.
His defense is the statute says we have to issue it. We have no choice. That's one of the beauties of the shall issue. It got completely rid of any liability for issuing a permit to somebody who then goes bonkers.
Well, you know, since we've allowed law-abiding citizens to carry in the state of Wyoming, obviously this place has just become a war zone like Utah. It's a horrible place to live. I go outside and I literally crawl to my car every single day so the bullets fly overhead. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I mentioned in my testimony. We had all these predictions of how bad it was going to be. You remember from living in Florida, the opponent said it would turn into the gunshine state.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
I remember that.
Yeah. You know, none of that happened.
No.
And we have the experience to prove it. And John had the data to show that none of their concerns have ever happened. They're concerned about mass shootings. Well, let me tell you, and this is John Lott's data, from 1950 to present, exactly 2 of these mass shooting places have taken place outside of a victim disarmament zone.
Yeah, see, my answer to that is I'm worried about mass shootings, too. That's why I want to be armed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, these guys are rational actors. You go back to Department of Justice reports that have been done since the 1970s, and DOJ comes to the conclusion that these people are rational actors.
Yeah.
And what's the object? You know, think of it as a video game. What's the object of the game? It's to kill as many people as possible so you can get the maximum publicity for your cause or whatever you're doing. You want to go out in a blaze of, I wouldn't call it glory, but that's the way they think of it. So the way to do that is to go into a victim disarmament zone. And we know for a fact that the guy who did the Aurora shooting deliberately passed a number of theaters where the Batman movie was playing and went to one that he knew was a victim disarmament zone.
Yeah. They play this. Well, hang on. I'm talking with Charles Curley, who's with Wyoming Liberty Group, has been testifying in Cheyenne regarding some gun issues. I got a few more questions for you after I pay some bills, okay?
I'll be right here.
It's the Bold Republic Radio Show. My name is Glenn Woods. Down in Cheyenne, Wyoming is Charles Curley. I got a quick non-gun question for you, Charles. I don't know if you've been able to see while you've been there, but since the governor passed a veto, and you mentioned it briefly there, the governor vetoed a civil forfeiture correction, as I see it. Is there any rumbling on the floor of the House or the Senate that they're going to override the veto?
I've heard rumblings. All right, if you look at the votes in both houses, there's far more than 2/3, which is the requirement for a override. So we should have the votes. But it would not surprise me in the least if the leadership and the governor and so on are going around twisting arms and whispering sweet nothings in the legislators' ears and all the usual shenanigans trying to get them to change their votes.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the Senate, which is the first house that has to vote on it, they are required by the Constitution to reconsider, and it has to be a roll call vote. So we'll get at least that vote. But I think the reason that leadership hasn't brought it up yet is because they don't think they've twisted enough arms.
So, wow. Now, that part I wasn't aware of. I was wondering why the holdup. They could have overridden this whole veto overnight. But it really comes down to who the leadership is. And do you think that they agree with the governor, the leadership does, or what's happening there?
Well, if I remember correctly, the leadership voted for the bill.
Oh, okay. They voted for the bill.
That. But as soon as the governor came out with his veto and sent his letter over, and remember, these are some of the same people who pushed SF-104 so heavily 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They take their marching orders from the governor on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Once they know where the governor stands, they tend to not deviate all that much. So
okay, it's interesting to see who works with whom down there. And okay, you know, see, to me, Charles, I've never understood this because as much as I talk about politics, all the talking about politics I do is for us to stop acting like a bunch of politicians.
Yeah.
It just really drives, all of this just absolutely drives me crazy, but this is what happens behind the scenes. Did you get any sense, because for the life of me I couldn't figure out, why the governor did veto the civil forfeiture correction? Because really, to me, the way the bill as it was presented made so much sense.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you can read his veto letter on the Wyoming Liberty Group website.
Okay.
But what it comes down to is, well, the current regime is working just fine and dandy.
Yeah.
Did not address the question of whether we really ought to be taking property away from people before they've gone to trial and been convicted of an actual real crime.
Yeah, this is where I agree with Steve Klein, also with Wyoming Liberty Group. It doesn't, to me, matter if the law is, if things are working fine the way they are. When you look at the way the law is written, there's a fundamental problem with it, where if I have property taken from me, I have to go prove, I love this part, that my property is innocent of a crime.
Right.
It just makes absolute no sense. Why wouldn't you correct that? Of course, the police are going to have to prove that I, not my property, am guilty. So, okay, I don't understand. I still don't understand why. Because I did read that opinion on the Wyoming Liberty Group website of the governor, and I still threw up my hands going, I don't understand what you're saying here.
What he's saying here is that the convenience of the police overrides your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights.
Oh, yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah, there you go. That's really a good way to put that. Well, just between you and me, I mean, it's not like there's a lot of people listening. I wish,
say hello to the NSA.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, I really do wish that we had a true conservative thinker as a governor in this state, and it doesn't look to me like we do.
Well, let me give you the clue. We are not going to get a real conservative if we keep electing federal prosecutors.
Right.
You read that opinion, and it's a federal prosecutor speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's scandalous.
See, I thought the same thing. Now, this has nothing to do with my opinion on people's sexual orientation, but when a federal court in Wyoming overturned a Wyoming law regarding marriage, my question was, why would we listen to what a federal court has to say? This is a Wyoming matter.
Yeah, good question. And I'm not an expert here, but I think the answer to that may lie in how the courts have interpreted the 14th Amendment over the years.
Yeah, or for that matter, how a federal prosecutor, now governor, interprets it, because he decided not to fight. It's what the court said, so it's over.
Yep.
Charles, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for coming on and explaining so much to you.
Thanks very much, Glenn.
All right. Yep.